Producing content, not easy. Creating a business plan to reach the masses, even harder. That's why Good To Go Media is hosting Collab Media and Film in Redlands, California, this September 8 and 9, where you, the content creator, can learn all about business plans, distribution, legal guidelines, and more. Presenters like Mark Butler and Randy Jameson will walk you through the tough parts of the content creation process. And if you need a financial boost for your project, the event is having a pitch competition where you can receive a prize of up to $20,000 to bring your ideas to life. Go to goodtogomedia.org to register and use code DISRUPTIVE for 20% off your ticket. Again, goodtogomedia.org, discount code DISRUPTIVE.
You're listening to Disruptive Adventism, a podcast about community, conversation, and conflict, where your ideas, traditions, and practices can be analyzed and changed. My name is Jose Briones, and I invite you to listen, to learn, and to live a life of purpose and disruption. It's time for another episode of Disruptive Adventism, everyone. We are really excited to have Becky Ortiz with us today. We're going to be talking about the topic of worship and just leading worship and how does that look like in Adventism today. How's it going, Becky?
Going pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm really excited to, just have this time with you and, just talk about this very important topic. Before we start, we always like to get to know our guests. That's our favorite thing, just at the beginning. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. What are you doing right now and how's life?
Man, so about me, I am, my name, Becky Ortiz. I'm the worship leader in Washington State at New Movement Church. I've been there for just over 10 years, and I haven't been worship leading that entire time. But that's my current role at the church. But I love it. I thrive in worship. I thrive in music. It's my absolute favorite things to give God the praise and the glory and just share that with other people.
When you say worship leading, what are you referring to specifically?
Leading worship, I'm talking about actually leading the song service, leading people in worship. So vocally, I sing. And so with that gracious gift that God has given me, I'm able to lead our church, lead the congregation in worship, in song, in praise.
When you say the idea of leading the congregation in worship, in song, and praise, do you mean just like being there and doing the hymns? I mean, that's what mostly when somebody goes to church, that's what they have in like the idea. It's like, it's a random person, that they may not know, just singing whatever song from the hymnal or maybe like a praise song, a worship song, a gospel song, whatever it is. Can you tell me a little bit more? Because I think that there's a difference, right? There's a difference between just someone leading like in the verses and someone leading in worship. At least you give me that impression. So maybe talk a little bit more about that. What's the distinction?
That's good. So we sing a more modern style of songs. We love hymns, right? However, our current demographic does not necessarily know those hymns or doesn't necessarily appreciate them in the same way. And for the people that we're trying to reach in our community, it isn't familiar to them. And it isn't something that necessarily catches their attention or catches their heart ultimately. So the music that we have at our church, that we share, that we sing, is really more contemporary. We do sing some gospel music for sure, but in me leading the worship, I definitely share my experience. So what people see from me when I'm on the stage leading the worship in our service is they see what I call freedom. in worship. They see my hands raised, or they see us swaying or moving side to side. Some instances, I'm sure they'll see dancing, and it's not to be disruptive of worship, but really that's how we praise, that's how we feel the Spirit moving us. And by us, I'm talking about the other singers on the team, or even the musicians, because our guitar player and our bass player, sometimes they'll stand during our worship service. And so you'll see them doing the same, and that's just how we worship. It's the expression of our love for God and of how we are feeling in that moment.
So by what you're saying, I think that there's a distinction between leading and just singing then.
Correct.
So, usually your traditional church experience will be like you come, you sit down, you pick up a hymnal, and then you kind of just start singing.
Right.
But you seem to be more trying to bring somebody into that experience of understanding, or maybe incorporating them into the worship. Like, worship as a more active participation.
Right.
Not necessarily, just you sitting down and looking at words. Which, I mean, like you said, hymns have value. And
of course.
The songs do, like, as well. Like, lyrics just have value over us. Can you share with me a little bit more of, like, the frustrations that you have with people maybe not understanding that difference or that role? When it comes to just, looking at how music is developed in the Adventist church, or maybe people will be like, why do we need a worship leader? So can you share with me a couple of the frustrations that you may have had in the past, or that things that you're going through right now?
Sure. So growing up in the Adventist church, I've experienced the traditional sense of what worship looks like, or what praise and worship looks like, which traditionally for me was somebody going up front and opening up a hymnal and turning to page whatever and singing a song. And like I said, I love hymns. They're at the core of what I know musically in the church, and they're great, and they're awesome, but they also have a place. They have a place for me personally, and they have a place, I believe, also in the church. We all have different musical preferences. And so what I've learned as a leader is that what we do is not about us. It's not about the type of music that I like to listen to. It's not about the type of music that I like to sing. It's about the people and about their experience and about what God is speaking to me that they need to hear. And ultimately, I want them to experience God, and I want them to experience the Holy Spirit, and I want them to experience His love. And so the musical choices that we make are important, at least for me and my team and our church. It's important for me, the songs that are chosen and the message that they have. I want them to impact each person, each individual person. And, as a musician, I know there are preferences, as I said before. And the struggle with that is generations, We have people that have been in the church for a long time that are so used to the hymns that that's all they want, or that's all that they know. And so when you bring something new, something that is not familiar, something that sounds worldly, there's a lot of resistance and there's a lot of frustration because they don't understand what that is and where that comes from and what it means and why are we raising our hands and why are we moving? Like, that's not of the church, that's of the world, and so that's where a lot of the resistance comes from, is the musical style and the actions behind how we look when we worship.
We'll be right back with more Disruptive Adventism.
You have an idea. You want to tell it to the world, but you don't know where to start. That's where Anchor comes in. They have the tools for you to edit, produce, and record your idea right from your phone or computer. It's the easiest way to reach and grow your audience. They publish for you to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major platforms. And to top it all off, they match you with advertisers so you can earn from your passion and your wonderful idea. So tell me, what are you waiting for? Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and follow your dream. You said the word worldly. So, automatically there's this kind of wall that you build up. It's kind of like, boom, okay, worldly, get it out as soon as you can. Why do you use that word? I mean, to refer to these ideas of maybe raising your hand or, exposing maybe different kinds of musical styles. Why is there a correlation between that and worldliness per se? Because you use that word and it kind of shocked me when you used it, because I was like, that's interesting. So why do people make that association, that you just made yourself even, or why do people have that kind of correlation?
I think it goes back for me to how I grew up and what I was taught and what I learned, especially with my grandparents. Their generation grew up in the church very differently than mine. Here we're millennials and we want to change everything and we want things to be a little bit different, and we want things fast. And when I associated that different musical style to being worldly, basically it doesn't sound like a hymn. It doesn't sound like, it's not just a piano and the organ, it's not a campfire song kind of thing, it sounds like you've got a whole bunch of drums, a whole bunch of synthesizers and all these different effects going on. That sounds like Michael Jackson. And it's but have you listened to what they're saying? Have you paid attention to the message behind the words in the song? Have you taken the time to just sit and think about the poet that wrote this and what their experience was and why they wrote this, For me, there's a lot of songs out there right now that I just feel are God written. God directly wrote these lyrics on paper. He just used a human being to write it out,
Like which song right now? If I know I'm putting you on the spot, but
no, that's
which song makes you feel like that? Because I think that there are very beautiful songs out there right now, and I will qualify them as the new hymns. We sometimes forget that hymns were written over a period of time, and they talk about the experience of Christians throughout time. And I think right now we're writing those new hymns to a certain degree. So which one, I don't know if you mind sharing a couple of songs that you're like, oh wow, I really, really think that, that delivers a very good message or a very good, idea about God or about the world, about the Christian experience. So share with us.
Have you heard the song So Will I?
Yes, by Hillsong, right?
By Hillsong United. Hillsong Worship, however you want. There's a lot of them. But yeah, for sure. So Will I. It's such a great song because I feel like it just encompasses the being of who Jesus and who God is and what worship looks like. The vertical worship, the words are just so beautiful. If the stars were made to worship, so will I. His creation worships him. All the things around us, they worship him. All the beings that he created, the plants, the rocks, the song says, even the rocks, if they're silent, so I will be silent as well. And I think it's so beautiful that that reminder that God is all powerful and that he created all these things that we see around us. Sometimes we forget, of course, but the song is a great reminder to me of God's glory. And that's important, you know, because we're human and we forget, and there's just things that we get lost in and we don't think about. And so when that song came out, I remember that line that said, if the rocks cry out in silence, so will I. And to me, that just spoke volumes. Like, rocks don't have mouths, you know, like they don't speak. There's no voice to a rock. But the meaning behind it is, you know, sometimes we just need to be silent, and sometimes we just need to listen for God and for what he's saying to our hearts. And so that song, man, that song can mess you up real good.
In a positive way,
of course,
guess, you know,
of course.
Make you reflect or such things. I think that, you know, there's this culture of kind of like lack of understanding or lack of wanting to understand.
Right.
You know, sometimes people are like, oh, well, you know, I just don't like it. Or just like, well, you know, give it a try. Like, you know, if you're asking me to give it a try and like kind of like the hymns, because a lot of people connect with hymns, a lot of people don't. You know, a lot of people connect more with Hillsong worship or maybe Elevation or, you know, different groups, musical groups, or even your favorite local artist.
Right.
You know, we had a series on independent artists in the podcast. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, we talked about with 2 different independent artists in the Adventist church and like, you know, their struggles or whatever. But you may connect with those, or you may connect with like the more like, I guess, wide spectrum, like, you know, outside of the church, you know, or Christian music that has been developed. But I think that what you're saying is very true. Like, you know, there are songs that really kind of connect with you. And it's not only that, because it's how you lead them.
Right.
You know, and as you're saying, like the importance of having a worship leader, not just somebody that is reciting.
Right.
The words.
It has to be internalized. Like what we sing, what I sing at my church, to me, they aren't just songs. Like, it's a journey during our worship at my church. Like, I feel like it's a journey that I'm somewhat creating for us as a church to experience. I want to take us on this journey to allow God and his spirit just do what he can do, and to show up and to show his power and to break down the barriers that sometimes we walk into the church with, you know. Sometimes there's just burdens that are on our hearts. We don't know what everybody, you know, comes in with, but I feel like the music, because it's at the top of our service especially, can help break down some of those barriers that we walk in with when we come to church.
I think music is very important. You know, sometimes we think of, and I'm pretty sure like you have shared this or maybe even thought about it, how in our church we put a lot of emphasis in the message, like the time of delivery of the word of God. But there is also a need for understanding that music is leading you to that place,
right?
To be ready.
Right.
And I think that that's how I appreciate when you have a worship leader that knows, you know, the musical material, or they know how to guide you there, because there's a certain level of intentionality.
Of course.
When you prepare with your team, how much time do you guys put in order to get to like any regular Sabbath, for example?
Oh, man. So I try and get my team all of the information as far as what songs we're doing and what keys and things like that we're doing by Tuesday, preferably Monday, so that they can let me know if they're going to be able to serve and be on the team on Sabbath. And so most of my team is actually lives out of town. So when we come together to actually prepare musically, we get an hour and a half Sabbath morning before our worship service begins. And what what I try to do is I give us maybe 30 minutes to really go through the song set to make sure everything is the way it is. But the other important factor that I put in is time to worship, which for us really is just an opportunity to express ourselves musically. So it's like a jam session, really, where we just get to ad lib and sing whatever song is on our hearts that morning and just get in a worship spirit, which is sometimes goes over time, because we just get so caught up in our worship. But I think that time is important for us as a team and for us on Sabbath, because we're preparing an environment and we're preparing ourselves and our team together. So to be able to worship together, not just in front of the congregation, but also just intimately as a team is definitely important for us. And that prayer time is key. Prayer time is key for sure.
I like what you're saying. And I think that there's this element of unity that is necessary. And like not only in purpose, but also like just the harmony of having everyone together.
Right.
And, worshiping before you actually start leading other people. As we start kind of like, going and closing, I want to talk about one more area that a lot of people have maybe concerns or, and from your perspective, I'd like to hear what you think is that with contemporary music or things of that nature, sometimes a lot of people are afraid that it's just a show. That this is like a high concert, everybody just, jumping and like, you mentioned putting out their hands and, stuff like that. It's all for like some sort of emotional rush.
Right.
This experience that is maybe created to play with your feelings and, kind of cheat you out of the experience of God himself. So a lot of people have that concern.
Right.
What would you say to people that look at it from that perspective?
I think I would say when you see somebody in worship, when you see a team singing, playing music, whatever that may be, if you're somebody who's looking to find something wrong, you're going to find it. We're human and we're all flawed and we all make mistakes. But ultimately, you can tell when somebody's faking it. You can tell when their worship is not real. You can tell when they're really not feeling the words that are being sung. For me, I like to address the congregation and let them know, in how I invite them to worship is, this isn't about me. This isn't a show. Like, I'm not here for you just to watch me sing because you like my voice or because you think the drums are cool in the church or whatnot. We're all here together to worship one God, to worship Jesus, to be in the spirit. We're here for one reason and we're here together and we're doing it together. And I don't ever want them to feel like I'm putting on a show. And I make sure my church knows, like, I'm not a show. What I do here is authentic. And I could never lead worship in a fake way. I can't take my church anywhere I haven't been before. I remember hearing that. You can't take them anywhere you haven't been. Spiritually, you can't take them. So as I'm leading worship, it's really something that I talk through the service. I talk through the songs, and I'm kind of engaging people and relating to them as best as I can, as to what the songs are saying and where we're going in our worship. So
that's a good answer. I think you're touching onto the idea that at the end of the day, if the leader, and this can be applied to many other different areas at the church, but like if the leader is not spiritually ready, spiritually mature, spiritually connected, it's going to reflect
Of course.
So I think that's a very, very valid point. Maybe one more mini area before we close out and give you the final word. How did your church get started into seeing the need for a leader, a worship leader? And also, how can churches today, maybe outside of your area, anywhere in the States or outside the world, outside the States,
right.
I meant, not outside the world. But how can they start that process?
Man, I think you have to trust God and develop leaders. For me, I was a part of the team when I came to the church. Someone invited me to come sing on the worship team, which is very different than how the worship team is now. It's kind of had its little transformation from being one style only or one way only to us growing as a team and, being able to kind of work together. But if you want a worship leader and you want to develop someone to become a worship leader, really you'll see it in them, in how they worship during the service. Are they actively worshiping when someone is singing hymns? Are they actively worshiping when someone else is doing songs, whatever type of music it is? Or are they just sitting in the back quiet, just zoned out on their phones or whatever? I mean, you want somebody who is connected. You want somebody who has a passion for people. I think that's important. To develop a worship leader, that worship leader has to love people. Because God is using that person, or will use that person ultimately, to love on your congregation. And they have to build those relationships, to build that trust to become a leader in your church. And so you've got to look for somebody who has a desire for people and has a desire, hopefully, for music, that's important, has a calling, because you can see that. You can see where people's talents are, and you can see what kind of things they like just by observing and seeing them. But you have to be open to new ideas and to developing people and to pouring into them, really.
Well, thanks for that. And I mean, I think it's great suggestions to, look for someone that is eager to take on that role and maybe developing a ministry out of that. Because that's what leading is, especially when it comes to worship. Well, Becky, thanks a bunch for, talking about this important topic.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And as it is our tradition, our custom here at Disruptive Adventism, we like to give the final word to our guests. So go ahead, give us the final word on worship leading.
Hey, man, stay connected to God and stay connected to your church and your family. Keep going. Don't stop. If you know God has a purpose for your life and you know what that purpose is, don't quit that pursuit, because He's going to take you there no matter what. That was our time with Becky Ortiz on the topic of worship leading and why is it important. If you want to reach to her, you can check out New Movement Church, and you can check them out on Instagram or Facebook, and they'll put you in contact with her and maybe talk a little bit more about that, or just check out what they're doing at New Movement Church with different songs, mixtapes, and all of their worship strategies that they're having. So go check them out. In the description below, you'll find the links to everything that is concerned Becky and her ministry at New Movement Church. Thank you for listening again. We really appreciate your time. We hope that you enjoyed this podcast, and if you want to continue supporting us, please make sure to share it, to give us a review on iTunes, and if you want to collaborate financially, go to patreon.com/disruptiveadventism. Every penny counts. Every dollar really helps us to keep the lights on here and to
keep moving this ministry forward. So we really appreciate your time today. We hope that you have enjoyed it and that you continue to be disruptive in the world, that you continue to make a change. Thank you for listening today. We really hope that you join us next time. And as always, we invite you to be disruptive.